If you're thinking about getting into model railroading or you're already an addict, boy do we have a project for you. Today we put away the wrecking ball and we start the construction of the logging camp. And it starts right now. Hey, welcome to It's My Railroad, the how-to show for regular people. Hey, if you haven't already done it, can you push that subscribe button for me? We have so many more of these episodes coming up. They're informative, they're fun, I'm enjoying them. I don't want you to miss a single thing. Today what we're going to do is take a look at some of the philosophy, some of the goals behind the improvements we're making to the logging camp. We're going to show you some examples of what we're trying to achieve, and we're also actually going to lay a piece of track the regular guy way. That's all coming up in this episode. All right, before we move on, just a little bit of housekeeping. As many of us know, building a model railroad is not really a sprint. It's more of a marathon. It takes time, and it's the journey that we enjoy being on. When you think about it, a train makes a journey from point A to point B. It's kind of similar when you're building the layout your train's gonna run on. It's not something that's done overnight. And even when you think you're done with your layout, if you're anything like me, you're gonna find that the bug comes back and you start thinking, what else can I be doing? Can I modify this? Can I change that? Can I expand it? It's a never-ending process. That's what makes it fun for many of us that are in model railroading. So I'm telling you all this so that you know not every episode is gonna have a whole lot of work being done on the layout. There's going to be plenty of discussion about why we're doing what we're doing and how we laid it out and the mistakes we've made and the materials we're using and then of course the actual installation of track and scenery materials and structures and stuff like that. So I encourage you to just keep going with these episodes. Let's build up a knowledge base on what we're doing on the BSR, and then you'll see it kind of snowballs. It'll kind of pick up speed as we move forward. But again, it's not about a race to the finish line. It's about enjoying all of the things we get to do when we're building a model railroad. All right, before we head into the hobby room, just a quick word about track and turnouts. We use the Pico turnout on the BSR, and for a reason that maybe you'll find amusing. I was looking into turnouts, I saw a video, and the guy in the video said, these turnouts come with a spring that keeps the switch points in position. I said, sold, ship me some. Here's why. A lot of turnouts don't have that spring, and so the switch points won't stay in position unless there's some other mechanism involved, like a motor or something that moves the switch points. And that's fine. If you're gonna be using motorized turnouts on your layout, you probably don't want these. And if you do get them, you gotta get in there and pull the spring out. I have two motorized turnouts on the layout. They are Pico turnouts, and I had to pull the spring out. It wasn't easy, but they work. Someday I'll tell you why I've got motorized turnouts. It's not relevant to what we're doing right now. So I picked the Pico turnout. I'm also using the Insel Frog turnout. That means this piece right here, that's called the frog, is not electrified. It's just plastic. If it were electrified, that would mean that whenever the trains come down over this turnout, I would have to switch the polarity of the frog or have it done automatically because there's going to be a short circuit there if I don't. There's more on that. I will put in the description down here some links to a more exhaustive study of turnouts and the Insel Frog versus Electrofrog version of the turnout. Okay, so now that we've selected the turnout, we needed to pick the kind of track we're going to use. I selected Pico track because I have Pico turnouts. It matches. You don't have to use Pico track with Pico turnouts or Atlas track with Atlas turnouts. You can swap it around. As long as it fits, it fits. But there are advantages or disadvantages to different kinds of track. To be honest with you, I don't know all the advantages or disadvantages. I use the Pico track and I like it. There's Atlas track, people love it. Pick the one you want. But here's some differences in them. Both of them are these two pieces I have. These are both pieces of flex track, which means I can bend it into the position I want on both of them. This Atlas one is super flex track. Watch this. When you pull it over, it just sort of shoots back like that, all right? Sound effects, huh? The Pico one, I can sort of bend it into position, especially with a longer stick, and it kind of keeps the shape a little bit more than the Atlas track does. Neither one of those is an advantage or a disadvantage, it's just the way it is. Looking at the rails, these are both code 80 rails. Again, in the description we'll give you some links to a more exhaustive study on code 55, code 80, code 100, whatever, rails and what all that means. But in essence, the rails are the same on these. I can't tell a difference if there is one. I'm sure some rivet counters out there will correct me on that, and that's fine. All are welcome at It's My Railroad. Notable differences though, and again, I don't think they matter. The Pico track has got kind of a brown railroad tie. Atlas has a black railroad tie. They both have grain like railroad ties in them, and we probably gonna paint it anyway. Again, probably doesn't matter. The railroad ties look about the same, front and back. I'm not seeing a huge difference in the ties. One thing you're gonna find with Atlas track though is these holes right here in the ties every so often. That's so you can drive a track nail down through the tie to hold the track down. If that's how you're gonna do it, that's cool. You can also drill a hole through one of the railroad ties of your Pico track, or you can glue it all down and not even need the holes. Again, it really depends on what you want to do. But there is one thing about the Pico track that I enjoy more than the Atlas track, and it's really subtle, and if you look really close you can see that these Atlas railroad ties are very symmetrical as they come down. Cool and all. If you're building a layout that's got newer track, a newer run, those ties are going to look like that without a doubt. My stuff's kind of older, and that's what I'm trying to simulate. And as I look down here, these ties can tend to be a little squirrely. They're not 100% symmetrical on the way down, or even equidistant. And another cool thing I can do is I can take this and I can pull it like that, and I can even exaggerate that look even more if I want. We're also gonna find in future episodes, I can cut out one or two of these ties and stretch them around and really modify this track to look like a really big piece of crap track on my layout somewhere, which sometimes that's what you're after. Bottom line is, Atlas track, great product, everybody knows that. Pico track, great product. There are other great track products out there. Just sort of pick the one you want and roll with it from there. I don't think you're gonna see that big of a difference. So there you go. There is your side-by-side comparison of Atlas track and Pico turnouts, and why we're using Pico products on the Brown Smith Railroad. You're gonna hear me mention that again when we get into the hobby room, which brings up the question you're probably asking yourself right now. Hey, Steve, when are we gonna get to the freaking hobby room, for crying out loud? And the answer is right now. Hey, welcome back to the hobby room and the Brown Smith Railroad. There's been a couple of changes since the last time we were together. I'm gonna go over them briefly. First of all, we have new lighting. I used to have some LED floodlights in my track lighting to light up the layout, but it was kind of yellowy. I did a little research and paid a little attention to the color of lighting. The lights I had in here were 2700 Kelvin is what they call it. I put in some fluorescent lights that are 5000 Kelvin. It gives it a much wider light and actually makes some of the colors and stuff pop, so we're pretty happy with that. Second thing we've added are all these pictures that you see up here on the wall. This is some inspirational stuff, kind of going to tell us where we're going with the logging camp. Just a little bit, I'm going to go over those pictures in a little bit more detail just before we get to some actual construction work. One of the other things we did while you were gone was went ahead and cut this piece of the layout right down flat so we can make like a little landing pad for the extension we're going to put on there. As you can see, if I just throw this in there right now, that's about a 1-inch piece of styrofoam. And if I set it on there, put a couple supports going down that way, it should give us a nice flat surface to build the rest of the logging camp on. Also, what we're going to do here, instead of having tunnel access from the top like I had before, I think what I'm going to end up doing is figuring out some kind of way to get a door or something on here, because all I really need to do is be able to open this up to clean the track when it gets dirty, kind of like right now, and to re-rail a car if just by some chance it derails. I really never had any problems with the tunnel before, but you know, prudence demands that we have some kind of way to get back into the tunnel. And we'll see how that develops kind of as we move forward. So just before we get into the real construction of today's episode, I'd like to show you these pictures I downloaded off the internet. The reason is, and the reason I have them sitting up here, kind of gives me an idea where I'm going, where I'd like to go anyway. And I'd like to share those thoughts with you right now, so maybe you can get a little bit more connected with the logging camp on the Brown-Smith Railroad. These first two pictures right here, what I like about these is you can see how there's all these logs built up to make the trestle for the bridge and for this other bridge, and that pretty much I think the logging guys used whatever they had available to get the rails from point A to point B. I think it wasn't so much intended to be like a permanent installation, but rather something to get the job done. And I kind of like that look. Everywhere else on the layout, I've got ballasted rails, and it's kind of got this permanency to it. And it's a good mainline look. I just want to kind of take a look at maybe experimenting with this a little bit in the logging camp. And then move over here. See, on these two pictures, there's two different ways they've got the structure set up in these logging camps. One, I kind of like this one here because you see the structure's kind of going up the side of the hill. And I'm going to have like a hill in the back of the logging camp. Maybe that's something that we can take a look at doing, so we can have a slow rise of hill into the rails and then a rise back up with structures on top. Might be a way to make it more possible to see more behind the layout. But this other way is pretty cool too. I kind of like the way these structures, which are clearly temporary structures, are just sitting up on top of this cribbing. That's something I can do. That's not beyond my skill level to make that happen. And I don't know, either one of them, I haven't made up my mind yet. I think we'll find out as we get there, but I kind of like both looks of them. And then over in these next two pictures here, in this one you can see how they just sort of strip this forest kind of bare. There's all this junk lying around everywhere, and trees just sticking up and clumps of wood everywhere. I kind of like that look as far as a real look, just sort of a dirty, just torn apart logging camp. These weren't exactly nature lovers that I'm familiar with. They're just people just hogging down trees and leaving a wake of destruction behind them. I might try to incorporate that in one part of the layout. And then this last picture here, this is the real star of this 6-picture group. This is the logging loading platform. I don't know what they call it, but I like it. Here's the deal. You can see on the far side those, if you can make that out, those are horses pulling logs onto this loader. And what I'm imagining happens, based on some of the other pictures I've looked at, is they will take and roll those logs down across those logs that head out to the tracks. And then when a train car pulls up, they'll just roll them on, plop, right onto the car. I like that better than a spar tree log loader because I'm going to be able to clean my tracks much easier and do some switching easier. Plus, all these structures that we're talking about that we'll get to, we are going to end up being able to just pull those out and put them back in anytime to make maintenance a little bit better. All right, so there you go. That's kind of the overview of kind of what we're planning to do in the future. But now, the real reason you came here today, let's get to some construction on the layout. Okay, with this next segment, we're switching to the GoPro cam, mostly because, well, I lost the footage from the other camera, and so we're stuck with this. Don't really like the GoPro cam, not going to use it so much anymore, but it'll work for what we're doing here. So right here is a section of track we're going to replace. Now, here's the thing. What I ended up doing when I put that turnout in, and you're going to see this as we lay some new track, we kind of cut the railroad ties off the ends where the rail joiners to go together. This way the rail joiners just sort of slide together. And I did that here. And as you recall, we cut the track on the turnout right here and here. So what that should mean is we should be able to just pull this out like that. What we do by doing that then is now we have a fresh place we can slide a new rail joiner onto. And then later on we can replace the railroad ties again. So I've got the same thing going on over here, and just pull that out like that. And see if, yep, pull that out. And pull that piece of rail off. So now we have this sort of fresh area in here. There we go. We've got this fresh area in here that we can now cut and lay a piece of track. Now you can see I've got this foam roadbed here. Now, you know, I saw a video on foam roadbed and they were all excited about it and they convinced me that this was the way to go. But, you know, I don't like it. It's kind of thin, it stretches, it doesn't like to take turns. I'm sure in some applications foam roadbed is great, but I switched back to cork roadbed because I like that. And so if you see us doing roadbed in the future, that's what you're going to see on the BSR. So the first bit of construction we'll do is we'll go ahead and lay a little bit of track. To do that, I am holding in my hand a piece of Pico N-Scale Code 80 Flex Track. I use Pico Track on the Brownsmith Railroad for actually no other reason than I have Pico turnouts and it matches. There are places online where they'll have a comparison of different kinds of track and what to use, but for what I'm doing, I didn't really notice that big of a difference, and so I figured, hey, we'll pick the stuff that matches the turnouts, and so far it's been really great. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and we are going to lay out to cut a piece to put where we pulled out the turnout over by the sawmill. We'll go ahead and just lay the flex track in right here and butt it up against this side of the layout over here, and then if we look over here, this is where we're actually going to cut. So what I need to do is just grab my rail nippers out of my pouch here and go ahead and find a spot, I think right here and right here, and that should be the length of track that we're looking for right here. So now what we want to do is we want to go through and we want to prep this piece for putting on the layout, and let me show you how we're going to do that. Okay, what I like to do then after we've cut the track is I like to prepare it for installation. One of the first things we'll do is we'll file down right here on the bottom. There's generally some kind of a little burr here or something like that. You want to get this smooth. What'll happen is if it's not smooth, the rail joiner has a hard time going on, and it could actually make an elevation change between the two sections of track when you join them. This kind of makes it smooth and soft. Over here we want to file down the inside of the web like this. What this will do is it'll allow the flange of the rail car to make a gentle transition from one piece of track to the other in case there's a slight misalignment there. And then lastly, I go ahead and just knock the top off just a little bit on the top of the rail. That is so when the cars pass from the one piece of track to the other piece of track, there's not this jagged bumping edge. It's kind of a smooth transition just in case the rails don't quite line up. So that takes care of that. Then we want to put on our rail joiners. Now, putting on rail joiners isn't exactly rocket science. You basically take your rail joiner and you take it and you slide it onto the track like so, like this, all right? And then you come through with your nippers and you go ahead and just nip it off. Now here's the thing we need to keep in mind. I'm sliding this rail joiner all the way on. I'm going to do it on all four sides because when we get this track over to the layout and set it down, the tabs that hang off these rail joiners are going to keep it from actually sitting in place, and we don't want that to happen. So we're going to go ahead and put all these on, stick them on all the way, and then we're going to put this on the layout. Okay, now that the piece is all prepped and ready to go in, all we need to do is we just sort of lay it in there. Make sure it kind of, there, it looks like it's lining up good. We got it in the correct way. Then I take my needle nose pliers that I have, these little suckers right here, little micro pliers, and just go ahead and grab the rail joiner, make sure the rail's lined up, and just slide that sucker on there like, whoop, hold on. Well, we had it right for a second there. Oh my gosh, what's going on there? Slide it on, and then we can slide this one on like that. And then we can come over to the other side, over here, and we can slide that one on. Wiggle it a little bit if you need to, and it goes in. And we'll slide that one in. Like that, and voila. Later on, we're going to come in, we're going to ballast this later. We'll solder the rail joiners on one side. We'll leave the other side unsoldered, and I'll tell you why later. And before we do all that, we're going to go ahead and just paint the rails in there. We'll add the railroad tie pieces in here that are missing. But for now, what this does, this lets me run trains from everything west, which is Portsmouth and Brownsville, to everything east, Switch Junction, the coal mine, and we'll have to come up with some modified version of logging operations for right now. Anyway, what I want to do, what I'm anxious to do, let's run a train across this sucker and see what happens. All right, so it looks like we got an incoming eastbound train heading for Switch Junction. So far, so good. And away we go. Look at that. I get to run trains again between the east side and west side. All right, confession time. That looked like it went really well, didn't it? That's because I'm a pretty good editor. I didn't get that right on the first try. It actually took me 2 or 3 tries to get it done. I cut the rails the wrong length at one place, and I screwed up the railroad ties in another place. And the reason I'm sharing that with you is this. I'll watch these model railroad how-to shows, and while I'm learning some great stuff, I can kind of get frustrated sometimes because the guys showing me how never seem to make a mistake. And, you know, I make mistakes when I'm doing this. I'm just a regular guy. I can't get it right on the first try. Matter of fact, most of what even we're doing now, there's a learning curve for me still. So I just want to be honest with you and let you know that I don't always get it right on the first try. But I encourage you to keep on making those mistakes. Well, there you go. Permission from Steve Brown to keep making those mistakes. There's a bonus you weren't expecting today, huh? Anyway, that ought to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you're enjoying these episodes, just push the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the ones coming up. If you liked this video, how about pushing that like button for me? And always, comments and suggestions welcome down in that comment section. Now let me ask you this question. If you haven't started building your model railroad yet, what are you waiting for? An engraved invitation? Thanks again for watching. My name is Steve Brown, and I will see you next time.